Alright, welcome back. We'll be doing one more chess video after our playing of the bird. So we're playing against a 1700 as black here. So we're going for d4, knight f6, our response to the queen's pawn game, and then we have e3, which is an interesting second move. I want to respond g6 because I'm a King's Indian player here, so let's go with that. And e3 is a little bit unique because usually this bishop wants to come out unless he is fianchettoing it. So we'll play bishop g7 here, go with our King's Indian plan, and we have e4 here, which is a move in a lot of King's Indian positions. We want to play d6 to try to kind of blunt the move, or take this thing out of the move of e5 before we castle. And we have, of course, c4. So this is basically like a King's Indian game that is played a tempo down, because you use two moves to play e4 rather than one move. So knight c3 on the next move should probably be expected, and we'll castle. And now we're basically playing the King's Indian with white a tempo down, and so we're basically playing like a King's Indian attack rather than a King's Indian defense. So the move you want to play in a lot of positions is e5. Go with a center break here. Go for the classic center break in the King's Indian. And then d5 is a normal response to a lot of the e5 pushes that you have. So we'll go with I think I want to play knight a6. And the reason I want to play knight a6 before jumping to c5 here is that this knight will have the extra d7 square, and this diagonal will still be opened for the bishop here, just in case we need to do anything along these lines. So we'll move knight a6, which is kind of thematic in a lot of King's Indian positions, and it's thematic because you want to route your knight to the strong square on c5, which is given to you after the d5 push. So knight c5. And then one thing you want to do, so he drops back his bishop to c2 here, to avoid getting taken by the knight. We can actually just win. No, we can't. What am I thinking? He has two defenders. As I was saying, one thing you want to do after you get this knight to c5 here is you want to cement it in a lot of the times with the move a5. And then that prevents him from playing b4 and kicking your knight out. And if you want to, if he wants to set it up with a move like a6, a lot of the times you can play a move like, or a3, you can play a move like a4, which will basically neutralize that threat, because you can just take it with on peasant there. So he plays bishop g5, which is kind of a waste of time in a lot of King's Indian positions. A lot of times it's better developed to like e3, and you don't really want to exchange it there. I mean, you can, but a lot of the times it's not very good, because you're weakening dark squares now around your king, and you won't have the power to contest this diagonal later in the future. So should we take back with a bishop or with a queen? Well, considering that the queen is the least developed piece, I want to take back with a queen. Yeah, I probably want to take back with a queen. All right. And now we can decide how we want to proceed with the plan here. We can play queen to g5 here, I think is pretty good because it threatens both to activate this bishop with tempo here, and it also we're going for our thematic f5 push in the King's Indian. So I think getting the queen out of the way while also like creating a threat is a pretty good. Does it run into f4? Let's see. I think we can just take there. And that will open up this other diagonal here that we should not forget about. It's a kind of central theme to the King's Indian is this diagonal here that you want to open for counterplay a lot of the times. Okay, we have his king move out of the way. And now I think we want to probably proceed with our plan of f5 and pushing this pawn down the board, which is a common theme in a lot of King's Indian. It also allows the f2 square if our opponent ever comes into attack here. So I think f5 is pretty good. And then if takes, I believe we will want to take back with a pawn rather than the bishop. And that's could be a little bit counterintuitive to a lot of like non-King's Indian players. But the reason is that we want to take back with a pawn because it prevents white from getting an outpost ever on these squares with their knight. Also, this file can be used for our attacks, surprisingly, actually. After like the king moves away, a rook could maybe come to like these squares and like either g8 or g7 and add on to the pressure down our opponent's king side here, down the G file. So let's say like, okay, we have the counter thrust of f4 here. So I think we can pretty safely take because neither of these pieces will threaten our queen after they recapture. And then the question will be, where do we go from there? So, after knight takes or rook takes, not sure which our opponent is going for here. We could play, I like to move bishop to e5, kicking this rook back. and also getting our bishop to a slightly better square here. And his rook can't go really anywhere more useful here, I don't think. So I think bishop to e5 is solid, I think. We're celebrating that our bishop is in a slightly better square here. And now we're targeting this pawn. And now we could maybe even look to activate our rooks along this file here. So takes is still guarded twice. Let's see. Queen h5 runs into this. I don't like that because, well, I think the move bishop d7 is okay here. I think it is okay. Because if this can just take, and it's also removing a defender, this, and we're connecting our rooks. So this is kind of a slow plan we got going on here. Okay, takes. So stuff has changed a little bit since last time. Do we still want to take with a pawn is a major question, because now our queen and our king are on the same diagonal, and his rook is also on the third file here. However, this square is still covered by the bishop. So I think since that square is covered by the bishop, we actually probably still want to, and then I can move king h8 and rook to f8 here. So this is still guarded. Overprotected here. Alright, so knight g3, we have 3 attackers now on this, but we also have 3 defenders. We cannot take because rook recaptures. So I think we can play king h8, and I think what that is preparing is the move f4 and then rook g8. So I think king h8 is pretty solid because 1, 2, 3, we have 1, 2, 3. And I moved to h8 because instead of this, because we don't want to walk into the bishop, I guess, spying our king along this diagonal somehow. So takes. He cannot take the pawn is an important thing. And then we can maybe play like, we could go for this kicking his knight away, and then rook g8 after. Maybe even this and then queen h4, because after his knight drops back, queen h4 comes with the threat of just mate and is guarded. H3 square is guarded by this bishop after a pawn push. So this is probably a pretty thematic King's Indian game. But we'll see. I'm debating like f4. Is it gonna be more effective to try to go for this square or for this square on the king side? All right, we have queen to f1 here, trying to put more pressure, but I think now, well, f4, we don't have this diagonal anymore. But we have this light square diagonal. Where can you move to? You can move to here. And I don't think I want to exchange the bishop. Say this is pretty dangerous for both sides here. We could maybe take and play queen c2. Queen d2. Let's see, takes. All right, probably wants takes. Queen here. Rook there. Takes. That actually looks decently promising. Because forcing the rook over here first makes it so he can't play rook to f2 to guard this pawn. He has to move the other rook. Takes, queen c2 here. Right. Yeah. Because he has to take with the rook, right? Most likely. And I'm looking to play knight to e4 here to threaten some stuff here. And then if takes with any piece after the capture here, this queen is kicked. And perhaps we'll go in an endgame. But I think an endgame with black here would not be terrible. Especially if we're able to get pieces on his second rank here from the resulting position here. Because we got rook here. Could even go for a queen trade. Yeah, this is what I calculated. So I calculated rook to c1, knight to e4, and then whichever piece takes, we open up this file towards the queen. His queen basically has to go for a queen trade, and then we come here. Unless, let's see. Yeah. Because we're threatening both this and this. So rook comes here. Then I think this is just fine. And he can't take because this comes with check. So I think I could even go for rook here first. Rook here first. Probably. Wait, but does that run into this? I mean, not really, because either way it's going to be basically the same. Or he has his knight here. We have a rook there. So I think the more forcing continuation would be like. Here, here, knight takes, we take his pawn here. How about knight here? Yeah, and I think the end game where we have our rooks here along his second rank, we have good chances here. I don't think this move is really that much to be worried about because our rook still defends the g8 square from checkmate. And we can move like bishop here, for instance. And then rook here is actually not even a threat. It's like a paper tiger because, I mean, we just checkmate if he ever moves his rook off this back rank. So we could activate our other rook. We could take this pawn here if he moves something like rook to f1. I think activating this other rook is probably a decent. Let's see, rook here. Knight here, knight. Yeah, you can't go there. Let's activate this rook. This knight basically has to drop back to like, yeah, to there. We can go like we could go here and try to exchange or win this pawn. I believe. Let's see. Here, takes, check. Here, check. I think this is okay. Move takes, we have to take back. Move check, we go here. Or here, here. F7, G6. All right, we have H3 just prolonging the game here a little bit, so we can move. We can trade. and then move bishop back here. Threatening this. I guess probably more accurate was playing rook to b1. Use a series of checks to try to centralize our king here. Actually gonna be sneaky. Wait. Let's see. Yeah, this is fine. Threatening this pawn. Threatening takes. Just simplification. Okay, defends it. Let's move our king to attack this. And then if we're able to win these pawns, it should just be pretty much over for the opponent. Let's move rook here. Now threatening here. Okay. You can get takes and takes. And then our plan will be to promote or just take his rook here. Our plan would have been to promote one of these pawns here. But yeah, the rook blundered was a rough one. Forgot the bishop can move backwards, but yeah. All right, let's analyze that King's Indian game there. So let's game review it, look at the engine lines here, and we can maybe discuss some central themes of the King's Indian along the way. So d4 and e3 is kind of an unambitious way to play the queen's pawn opening from the beginning, I think. Usually you go c4 and e4, especially against the King's Indian type setup. And we saw our opponent go for e4 later. He just took 2 moves to do it, which is kind of just like slowing you down in the process. So this is kind of like King's Indian position. You'll see, except either the knight or this bishop will also be developed. Usually this knight will also be on f3. He's just behind a tempo because he played e3, then e4. So e5 is a good way to strike back in the center here. And most commonly, yeah, it's met with the move d5, which our opponent did play. There are drawbacks and advantages to the move d5. The move d5, it gives white more space, like a space advantage on the queen side, and maybe he can like start getting an attack going eventually on the queen side and win material there. However, it relinquishes control of this c5 square, and if black is able to cement a knight there on c5, that's usually very good. So that was my thought process behind knight a6 and then the knight moving to c5. So we have knight to e2. I'm not sure why he didn't go for the f3 square. Maybe he was like wanting to push the pawn after castling or something. I'm not sure why, but we have knight c5, our follow-up. We follow up our plan. Then bishop drops back to c2. Reasonable because he doesn't want to give up the light squared bishop. And then a5, some move to try to like temporarily cement in this knight against the move b4 will just take. And if a3, I don't think actually a4 works in this position, but yeah, you can go for the f5 push now. Is a good way to do it, because a4 they can just take. They have too many attackers, but you can start your attack on the king side now after, if they try to take up time attacking this knight here. So we have bishop g5, which runs into h6 typically in most of the King's Indian positions. So we have h6, takes, and then queen takes. And my thought process behind the queen taking was the queen is the less developed piece that needs to get off the back rank here. And so that was pretty much a deciding factor, because either way, whichever piece I have on f6, I probably wanted to get it out of the way for this f5 push down the road anyways, at least if I'm playing like thematically. So yeah, I have queen to g5 here, which I figured, let's get out of the way. Let's make this possible. The theme of the King's Indian kind of is the f5 push a lot of the times to start a kingside attack. So let's clear our queen out of the way and also create like a potential threat here at the same time. So the king moves out of the x-ray here, pretty reasonable. And we have f5, which is still okay. And then f4, yeah, he responds with this counter strike because his knight was not on the f3 square here. So yeah, I just took, and I figured it's not too dangerous because either way he takes back. It's not like attacking the queen or any of my pieces. It's not really bothering me here, and it allows me to develop my bishop to now a better square, to the e5 square here that I took up with my bishop, and now it's spying the h2 square for the king. So we have rook f3, and then yeah, I guess f4 was probably a way to play it like right off the bat better, opening up like this diagonal. But I didn't play f4. I played bishop d7, trying to activate, my last piece, get the rooks connected, and stop this knight jump here. Was my thought process behind that. So e takes, and then we have g takes. I thought g takes was still okay. I guess Stockfish disagrees. I could see the danger of rook to g3, like a move rook to g3, leading into the x-ray of the queen and king. But my thought process behind that being okay was that the bishop guards this square for now. But I played g takes f, which was not one of the top 5 moves by any means. Says it was kind of an inaccuracy. I should have probably taken with the bishop and offered like a bishop trade and just use the activity of my pieces to my advantage. But we have knight g3. So I get the idea behind this move, and I think his idea is that, oh, the guy has to automatically, trade his bishop and walk into this pin. But that's what you want to avoid, is like automatic trades. Like you see a piece that makes contact with another piece, like this bishop, and you're like, oh, I gotta trade it. No, stupid. Like, look what happens after that happens. And if you, like, there's no reason I should give up this bishop on e5. It's probably like my strongest minor piece here. And the knight is pretty strong as well, but it has even more of a function. It's pressuring like the whole board, eyeing this h2 square. But knight g3, and then we have king h8, which is pretty good, stepping out of the way for like my rook to come to g1, potentially to g8. We have queen f1. He's trying to hold on here pretty well. I'm pressuring this so it discourages my rook from coming to g8. And yeah, I was considering queen h4. I guess, yeah, what did I play? I played bishop takes, which is counterintuitive against what I was saying earlier, that my bishop was my strongest piece and I don't want to exchange it. But the circumstances slightly changed because now I'm not walking into this pin. Stockfish still doesn't like it. I guess my idea was exactly like as calculated in the game. What happened in the game was my calculation, but after queen d2, rook c1, I don't think rook c1 was actually the best. I think maybe he could have looked to go for an earlier queen trade, like queen e1. And no, wait, yeah. I guess this is a sacrifice because he has... What would happen if I just take the bishop? Queen e3. Just threatening mate. Yeah, I guess he could have sacrificed there if he... But also like queen d1. And I would have had to basically just trade. And then my rook wouldn't have been on the second file here, the second rank. So... yeah, that's something you should keep in mind, is the opponent has alternatives to the things you calculate, and you have to consider those alternatives. I mean, it still would have been even, but definitely wouldn't have been as clear-cut as this rook to c1 move. So after this, he takes with a bishop, which is the best move. I take back, and now queen to e1, offering up the queen trade. And I figure, we have pretty good chances here if we can get our rook to his second rank. He takes. And yeah, this is exactly what I calculated into. Take him in an endgame. And then since our rook guards this back rank square, we can move our bishop to f5, getting out of danger there from the knight. Kick the knight out. And then offer a trade here. Or he's going to lose that pawn there. So I think that was probably the best move, h3. Because we basically have to take, and then the bishop moves to d3 here. His rook gets on my second rank, but our pieces are just like better aimed to win his pawns, I guess, than his. even though he's up a pawn currently. I mean, he's just going to lose these central pawns. So rook b4 is kind of like the finishing touch here, pressuring the last two pawns to win them. And then we have king takes both pawns. He's lost the central pawns. And then our opponent immediately fell apart and blunders his rook. But I mean, he was probably losing anyway after I cleared this pawn out and then am able to push this other pawn. Our pawns are just more advanced and his knight is in front of his other piece already, so we're able to win that. Looking at the King's Indian defense, let's open up another analysis board here. We have let's flip the board so you can see the black pieces here. We have d4, knight f6, and he played e6, but what his setup was most similar to, I'll give like a sample line, was c4, g6, knight c3, bishop g7, and then we have like e4, d6. He had his bishop on d3, I believe, which is a possibility in the King's Indian. Castle, and then knight f3. And if you look at the position, I believe it was like on the same move during the game. The only thing different about this book position and his position was that he was like behind in development one piece. Like it was my move here instead of white to move. He did not have this other knight out because he pushed e3 and then e4. And the book move for this position is e5, I believe, still. I mean, you can play bishop g4 because, yeah, bishop g4 is good here because his bishop has been developed to d3 instead of e2, his dark square bishop. But you can still push e5. And the most common is to push d5 here. You can push e5 and then d5. And after this, you can play either knight a6, you could play knight d7. I like to play knight a6 and reroute my knight via this route. But yeah, you can play a5 first, trying to get control of the b4 square here. But yeah, knight b to d7 is probably like a solid way to play this. And then bishop to c2, kind of preemptively avoiding the knight jump to c5. So you play a5 first before you go, because now it's not threatening to take the bishop. So you have to play a5 first to avoid running into b4. And then white will probably castle. And then you can like start going with the typical King's Indian plans. You're like knight c5, and then you probably want to play like their knight f to d7 and push f5, or you can play knight h5, push f5, and start this kingside attack going. But a3, the idea is to push b4 here, and it says just like, yeah, c6 is also a way to play it, but I mean that's just like the typical King's Indian setup here. You wanna look for the f5 push. Also challenge your opponent in the center here after you've prepared it by the fianchetto. So that's some interesting notes we have on the King's Indian. And I hope you enjoyed the video. I'll see you in the next one.